of their...
Yeah, it's pinned,
Okay.
and I'm gonna advertise everything now as well. Pinned.
Don't you know, Sue?
Sounds good.
Nobody reads the pin.
I'm gonna advertise everything now as well.
Don't you know, Sue?
Sounds good.
Nobody reads the pin. Oh, cool. We're not going infinite anymore. That was a tad concerning. Man.
Oh, that does show up. Okay. Huh.
I still just... Civilized is such a rude adjective.
Yeah, I think we've
That's
talked about
where
this
the-
before, right? Where it's like, I'm civilized. In contrast, thou art not.
Yeah, like...
That's good stuff.
No, these are the civilized ones. The rest of them, savages.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny
It's
because the
like-
set itself has like all the nomadic desert people that are in like green, non-civilized colors.
Yeah. No, it's like if you had a keyword, literate. Like, damn.
Can read.
That's just rude.
That'll be for my for when someone does a Victoria set. That'll be literacy. It'll be important there. Easy.
Oh no, that's the keyword for reading Rainbow, the book set Zerpack
Mhm.
was working on.
Oh, hey, why does this
Yeah.
render out weirdly? Actually, I just realized. Huh. That is weird. Like it shows more of the window than it shows more of the window on the stream than I see in OBS.
Oh,
That's very
That's
strange. Like it all lines up in my OBS. I don't see the word uncommon down at the bottom right, for example. That's weird.
adjust it to the stream and just let your OCD down, I guess.
I don't know. I don't know how to even do
Is
that.
your OBS on the right window size setting?
Hmm?
Is your OBS on the right window size setting?
Maybe it's not. Well, whatever, doesn't matter. Let me just move these things down, I guess, then.
So wait, we are streaming right now, right? Okay, so I should stay vaguely on
I'm
top
just
of
trying to start joining or not. We got 4 viewers. Whether that's how many of those are ours, we have no idea.
One of
But
them is me.
yeah, if people are in there and looking at the
3
chat
of
and
them.
stuff.
3 of those people are us.
Yeah,
And one is the
that does
electrical
not surprise me.
skateboard who is the bot. I know that bot.
Yeah, I do want at least someone in the chat to be like helping us with like sound stuff, or are any of you guys listening in?
I might get feedback. I can turn it on for now. It sounds good. No, it sounds good.
All right, cool. So we'll probably just begin then.
Why is theater mode not the default?
Cool. Oh, and by the way, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking in, this is for you guys, Plane Sculptor's, just the default sorting settings. Or actually, no, we're going to do, let's do it the same way as we did last time. So, commons first.
Okay.
And then white, then we just move through the colors. So we're going to start with white commons sorted by converted mana cost.
So I just invited Bamble or Bamblebee to watch the stream since he
Oh,
was
good.
interested.
Sure, that's a good idea. Cool, so the first card should be Ankini Trickster. All right, but before that, I'll give the introduction for the stream itself. Hello, everyone. We are 3 designers from the Custom Magic Discord here today to give a review of the, starting with the commons. Maybe we'll see if we get any farther than that. Probably based on our last stream, probably not. But the commons of the custom set Babylos, which is in development right now. So we'll be talking about, we'll be giving our reactions, kind of elaborating on any thoughts we have for things that we consider to be good or bad about the design, about individual cards, and about the kind of the design of the draft environment in general. Let's introduce ourselves. Your main host is myself, Zoo. We also have with us Simon,
Yo.
also known as Tyrant. And also for our guest designer of the week, we have...
Hi, I'm Cleo. I also go on a few other Discords known as Through Loathing. Thank you so much for having me. I really love that you guys are doing this and working to expand the community and expand the voice that we have about this hobby, if you will, or passion that we're all involved in.
No problem. It's going to be fun. All right, and let's get a start. So what I'm going to do is, just to make this all move along faster, I'm just going to read every single card. Is that fine with you guys?
Yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Cool. So our first card is the Incanic Trickster. It is white for a 1/2 creature spirit, and for 2 and a tap, it has tap target creature. This seems like a fairly normal, just kind of could go anywhere, or just like this is kind of what you just do when you have a 1-mana tapper, right? Seems very normal. Any thoughts?
Like mechanically, this just like fine for clunky tapper. Makes sealed interesting more so than draft. I want to point out that the flavor here is really strange.
It's weird. It's very
Like,
weird.
it's a white trickster.
Spirit
and
that kind of
the
looks like a
flavor-
human. Kind of looks like it has wings, but it doesn't fly.
But like the flavor text is about how one of these things created a pulley system, which fits into the larger themes of Babylos of invention and innovation and furthering society.
Mm-hmm.
But why does a pulley system tap creatures?
It
I'm not
hoists
opposed
them,
to it.
Simon.
Like it might be an allusion to something I'm not aware of,
Mm-hmm.
but I find this intriguing, at least, if not confusing.
Yes. Any thoughts, Cleo?
I think that having an effect like this was very strong the last time we've had it around, despite the cost, but is good for limited in terms of keeping things in check. And I agree that the flavor does not really sell for me.
All right, cool. I don't. Let's move on. The next card is the Cart Dragger Oxen. For 1 and a white, you get a 2/2 creature ox. Whenever a discovery enters the battlefield, and oh, I forgot to put the mechanics down. Huh. Well, I'll do that when you guys are talking about this card, but I'll continue reading the card.
Okay.
Sorry. So it says, whenever a discovery enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Cart Dragger Oxen. So, Cleo, you want to talk about discoveries?
Discoveries are similar to a saga frame, but instead of them disappearing when they're gone, correct me if I'm wrong in any of this, they stick around to give a continued effect. So they kind of build up. In general, the first 2 effects are building up to the third one in a way that is flavorful and feels kind of like this, like you're playing that old Civilization computer game, and you are deciding to invest in a research. When we have done the limited, the discoveries, especially the rare ones, the uncommon ones, were pretty powerful. And so incentivizing us, if you look at this card from a draft perspective, he's already a well-costed 2-mana 2/2. If you play 1 discovery, you have a 2-mana 3/3 common, which in the past has been very strong, right? So having this card exist, I think, is good for limited because it's encouraging you to take it early because it looks like a well-cost common, and is then encouraging you to draft a set mechanic.
Mm-hmm. And it's neither unreasonable in either mode of you don't have it,
Right.
or that you do have it. It's a 2-mana 3/3. That's not. There's no absurdity to that.
And discoveries are not so rampant that you have to worry about it being a 2-mana 3/3 all the time.
Yes.
This isn't like
I believe
it's not
they're
just
they were removed from the commons, if I remember correctly.
So I enjoy this for the same reason I enjoyed a few of the harm designs, where it covers you playing an enchantment that doesn't really affect the board by giving you board state as a reward for it. I also just enjoy how clean the flavor is, that a very simple machine becomes improved over time.
Oh, by the way, sorry for the layout. I didn't realize that the mechanics were showing up yet.
and I did just double check. There are currently no common discovered, so it is only uncommon and high.
Okay. I've forgotten the third mechanic. The attacking. What is that called? Frick. He doesn't have it listed on the Plane Sculptors page. His Plane Sculptors page is out of date.
Hold on, I'm checking. Let's skip
Endure, that's what it is. Yeah.
Endure. And Endure actually plays really wonderfully. I do enjoy how.
All right. So are those the only three mechanics? Civilized, Endure, and Discoveries.
I believe those are the only three named ones, and the other ones are in. Yeah, I mean, there's like the Lamasu tribe, which is kind of new and has their own enchantment matters in blue, and we have, so on and so on. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of ourselves.
I'm terrible with OBS. Well, I'll start reading the next card. So, and I just agree with everything that was said about that card. The next one is the Kanon Shield Wall. It is 1 and a white for a 0/4 creature human soldier. So it starts out just as non-defender wall, but with civilized. So the first time we're seeing this mechanic, he gets +3/+0 as long as you control an artifact, a creature, and an enchantment. So that is what civilized is. It's bonuses that you get when you control at least one of an artifact, a creature, and an enchantment. What do we think about this?
I think it plays into a similar. Well, I was going to say it plays into a similar space to the Ox, where it becomes a 3-power creature for 2, but that is blatantly incorrect on my part, because this goes from something that has no power, goes from a quite awful creature to a very powerful one, and it doesn't grow beyond that, while the Ox starts out with a higher floor and even has a higher ceiling if you play multiple discoveries.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I like the numbers here just as a player, but I see nothing wrong with it as a design.
Where it'll start out with an uneven power toughness, and then when it gets the bonus, it'll go to an even power toughness. So in this case, we see 0/4 becomes a little bit wonk. Obviously, a 4/4 would kind of maybe be a little absurd. But also maybe +3/+0 is also quite, I think, is quite large for this kind of bonus as well. I would normally expect to see +2/+0 or something along those lines, so maybe that's something to look at. But otherwise, it seems like a fine application of the mechanic, especially for, as we'll see later, and as you see in the archetypes listing, a lot of the civilized decks are a little bit more control-y, grindy, as you would expect of any deck that is wanting to play artifacts and enchantments and, have enough time to be able to do that. So this seems like a good enabler plus payoff for that kind of strategy, in a sense.
I do find it a bit strange that civilized on creatures asks you to have a creature. I feel like with the flexibility of ability words, you could just say whatever type that card is not.
Mm-hmm.
Or perhaps another. It reminds me of how people don't realize you can sacrifice the Saraseer to itself.
Well,
Mhm.
how did Wizards word Metalcraft on artifact?
I'll look that up.
That was a threshold greater than 1, notably, but that's a good point.
What's an example of one
The
in
mods.
Metalcraft?
Opal.
Because I do believe that it counted itself. That
It
did
said
not-
3 or more artifacts. It didn't say 2 or
Yeah.
more other artifacts, for example. I mean, that was a long time ago. Maybe there's an argument
Yes.
for nowadays that they would say, as long as you control an artifact or enchantment. However, and this is what
I
I've
do- I
found
do
to be the
agree that
case. Oh, sorry.
I do agree that it is slightly confusing in that it counts itself, and that it does feel off, and I don't know what the fix is for that.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say is I've had a tendency in the past to, when thinking about the set, forget that that's even part of the condition. Just because when you're drafting the set, it's so much more. It matters so much more that you be drafting those artifacts than enchantments, because if you're a semi decent drafter, you're drafting creatures anyways. So it probably would actually be even worse for that if it didn't say it right there on the card as well.
That's true. Like, creature is in limited, not a hoop. It is more of a hoop in constructed.
Yeah, but it does matter in the gameplay. Like for example, that one time that Cleo and I were playing the set, the fact that I was able to keep them off a creature for a while, I was removing their creatures, really affected how the civilized bonuses they weren't getting them anymore.
I was unable to get civilized in that in the third game of it, as you kept me off creatures.
Are there non-creature civilized cards?
Yes. So that's something we can think about. We can think about is civilized something that's going to be only wanting to go maybe on creatures, just so that kind of maintains artifact and enchantment as the things you're caring about, or does it want to go on all 3? So then it becomes, hey, it's this mix. They all matter.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I think that I would like the mechanic more if it did not appear on creatures. I do think that it is slightly confusing, and I think that I would rather have my civilized creature, so like this slot, which is a defensive early draw for the civilized deck, be something that helps me find and protect my artifacts and enchantments, as well as my life total, than something that gets a bonus when I have them. And I don't know if there's a certain number of slots that like he has to fill for civilized, right?
But, I mean, he needs a certain amount to make it that it appear enough to feel like a theme,
Right.
But
I guess what I mean is like you take spell mastery at common. We didn't have spell mastery showing up on creatures, right? It doesn't mean that there weren't creatures for the spell mastery deck that were helping me achieve spell mastery.
Right. That there were tools for the deck, just they didn't have the mechanic on it.
Absolutely.
If I remember correctly, the enchantment that we're thinking about is an uncommon.
Yes.
So.
And I if I had been in white in that draft, I would have drafted these and gotten them late. And I do like that part of the design. Like, this is a card that if you are in a white civilized deck, which there, I believe, are 2 archetypes for that, right?
Yes.
This is a card that really heavily rewards that because you are going to get it late. This is going to table. And so you are getting a solid 2-drop in your civilized deck that is going to table and help you protect your life total. And that part of the design I really like.
Yep. So it doesn't enable the part that people think of as hard about civilized, but it enables you and then it gives you time. So yeah.
Yes.
All right. Do we have any more thoughts on that? Spent a little bit long on that one.
Well, more so is our first civilized card, right? So I think we're allowed to take that time.
Yes, that makes sense. I don't know. I like teasing myself on things like that.
Okay.
But it does not matter. So are we good to move on?
I am.
Cool. So our next card, we see an enabler for the civilized decks. We see the Place of Worship. It is 1 and a white for an enchantment aura, enchant land. Enchanted land has tap. You gain 2 life. So this is a repeatable life gain engine that, because it is a enchantment that sticks around on the battlefield, goes into those kind of dirtily civilized decks that we were talking about. I'm going to start talking about the card. At first glance, I feel like the numbers... I feel like this is a lot of life gain for not actually very much. So it's going to be 1 and a white for the initial cast, and then effectively 1 mana every time you tap it. I think it's not like busted, but that might be like limited problematic, especially in sealed. What are your thoughts on that, Simon?
I think this is a very undesirable card to have.
Mm-hmm.
It creates stalled out games where even when things are happening, it can't come to a conclusion.
Mm-hmm. Because this offsets the effect of your opponent beating in with you with 2 power every turn completely, right? If they're saying, hey, I'm trying to just win the game with this bear, or maybe the board stalled and they're trying to win the game with like a Windrake or something, and that's the only thing they can really attack in with. That completely negates that. And then even when you get up to 3-4 damage a turn, it starts taking games that are ending in 4 turns, 5 turns, and starts turning them into games that are ending in 10, 11, 12 turns, which just kind of sounds not very fun.
And if your opponent failed to create an aggressive presence early game and you played this, you can be gaining 10, like you can be gaining well more than 10 life. You can be gaining 18, right?
Mm-hmm.
In sealed especially. And while not powerful necessarily, I don't think it's desirable
Yes.
to allow that to happen. I'm reminded of Nyx's Fleece Ram from Theros block. It was a 1 and a white enchantment creature sheep, 05, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you gain 1 life. That was a very useful tool for slow decks because by threatening to block most things, it gain you more than 2 life a turn. The difference here is Nyx's Fleece Ram is easier to interact with because
Yeah,
it's
you
a
can murder
creature.
it.
And Theros very explicitly wanted it both wanted games to take longer to have creatures to come up the board, but it also had a lot of tools to make the game end. It had a lot of things that brought the game to a conclusion through Voltron, through Monstrosity.
Yeah, you were expected that you were going to eventually have like a 6/6, a 7/7, even in the decks that don't normally do that, like green decks.
And I want to point out that Nyx's Fleece Ram, it was an uncommon in Theros and an uncommon in a Master set.
Mm-hmm.
That's not necessarily.
That's not because it was too
power level for
powerful. Yeah,
gameplay.
exactly. Because that's just not something you want at common, perhaps. Cool. Any thoughts, Cleo?
I was just setting up so that I was hosting this on my stream. So now I'm hosting it.
Ah, nice.
Not a whole ton of viewers will show up, but I have a few will. So I think that my actual biggest issue with this, I don't disagree with anything that you guys just said, right? My biggest issue with the card is even different in that I really dislike enchant lands, especially at common. That in a lot of ways, at its best, the way that this card reads is white 1, like at its fairest, not like the disgusting thing you guys were talking about, but the kind of functional way that it's used in a lot of aggressive matchups is going to be white 1, sacrifice a land, destroy a 2-powered creature. And then it sticks around after that creature gets blanked on the board and does other gross things at common.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, I dislike the design of white 1, sack a land, destroy a creature. And in a lot of ways, I think that this card does read that.
Yes.
You're saying because it virtually denies whatever that creature can do to you.
Yes. And that I have to sacrifice a land as that cost. The flexibility of not having to use it over the necessity to use it, I think that a lot of the times is going to cost you a land in that sense. And so you're using it as a removal spell that then later on, similar to like a tapper, has the utility of doing these other things too. But in an aggressive position, like if I'm the civilized deck and you're the black green or mid-range deck or the red, one of the other aggressive decks, more aggressive decks like black red, I'm using it as a removal spell or a pseudo removal spell, and I have to sacrifice a land.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it does a whole lot of weird things, mostly bad things. Obviously, the intent here was enabling civilized, but maybe we need to be looking at something else. All right, let's move on to the next card. We have the Progenitor's Reclamation. Is that how that's spelled? Reclamation? Well, whatever. It is 1 and a white for a sorcery. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. You gain 3 life. This is just kind of, at first glance, this is just kind of your typical slight variant on a naturalize that white gets, that green gets, that they kind of just do without much thought. But obviously in a set with Civilized, the artifact enchantment stuff going on makes this a lot more interesting from the perspective of design. What do we think about where this is, for example, like on the curve at 2 mana?
Well, I think sorcery was the correct to create fewer blowouts.
Mm-hmm.
And the cost is near negligible.
Mm-hmm. You're saying just because it isn't so much reading destroy target artifact enchantment as it is reading take opponent off of Civilized in a lot of cases.
And if they have a really good stuffery, that sorcery you deal with, it's nice. But you are not playing this on curve, and the mana efficiency, although it often will matter, I don't think it will be a turning point for the gameplay of the card.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those issues where like you have to print things that interact with Civilized, but at the same time, like part of me thinks that maybe those cards should cost a little bit more so that there is less ways. Like in the drafts that we've done so far, the Civilized decks have been struggling some, and so here we are putting a very well costed common in that completely shuts down or can shut down their strategy, because destroying one artifact or enchantment and having the choice of which of the two it is goes a really long way towards taking them off of their Civilized.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm saying that I think that in general, I don't like this effect being 2 mana in this set.
Okay.
Because Civilized is not a problem in this more archetype that we think is struggling. Is that true? That is true?
I mean, I drafted it twice, so.
How did it play when you drafted it?
I didn't play it during those drafts. But so I can't really know for certain. I don't think it's necessarily. I think it is struggling in one respect, but being hated out is not. I think it would feel bad, but I wouldn't actually think it would make it that much worse. The difference.
Right, that makes sense.
But it might be one of those things where actually this could come in from a player psychology perspective, saying, if someone is paying attention to what the hate is in the environment, someone might say, "Oh gosh, there's a 2 mana naturalized environment. Pfft, people are just gonna blow up all my stuff. This is absurd." And maybe making it 3 mana, like Simon said, doesn't actually matter too much how much it costs, but maybe that would alleviate a little bit of that feeling.
Well, it could also be like a seal of cleansing, which then would incentivize the Civilized players to draft it and use it against each other while also rewarding them for having another enchantment or artifact in their deck.
Okay, so
that's a little weird.
The only time an O-ring was done at common was Isolation Zone.
Mm-hmm.
Not enough. I mean, an O-ring would be very strong.
Well, Seal of Cleansing is an enchantment that you sack.
Oh, I confused it with some other card. My mistake. Oh, the Seal Cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think that I'm not sure.
I think seals are interesting in this environment, just because they're enchantments that you can put at common easily.
I do think there's an onboard complexity concern for removal.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair.
You could do
like one that just like draws cards pretty
yeah,
reliably.
Like the fonts and Theros.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. Cool. Well, that's something to think about. I think we're good on that one.
Yeah.
I like the art.
Yes, that is nice art.
All right, the next card we have is Sun-Blessed Courage. It is 1 and a white for an instant. Target creature gets +2/+2 and gains lifelink until end of turn. What do we think? Just a pretty decent combat trick. Well,
yeah, limited pack filler combat
it's
trick.
like, yeah, it's okay. It doesn't seem... I doubt the lifelink is particularly important in terms of the design.
Yeah, I mean,
It will
it's
rarely be more than 1-for-1, and
Mhm.
it's only situational. The lifelink can contribute to games taking longer than they should, but in itself isn't an issue.
great. But if we're choosing what keyword to put to stick on it, I do like that if I'm going to play a combat trick in my civilized deck, it helps make the game go longer.
Yeah.
But maybe this is not for those decks. But white is very controlling across the board, except for red white, which is go wide.
Yeah,
Right.
you're saying looking at what the archetypes are.
Right. This doesn't directly like if you are putting a white combat trick in, which you have to do, right?
Mhm.
Which combat trick do you put in? I see why Matt would choose lifelink.
Mhm.
Um, 'Cause, like if you're in a green white ramp deck and you're going to play a lifelink combat trick, that could effectively be gaining you 10 life.
Yeah, because you're
Uh,
playing on big creatures
right. And the
sometimes.
blue white civilized deck, I believe, is a 5 power blue common creature it gets to play.
Mhm.
So that lifelink can go a really long way in those decks. So we've seen in previous formats, black lifelink instance, like the Butcher's one. I don't
Mhm.
remember the name of it off the top of my head.
Doing kind
The
of similar
lifelink
things.
was very relevant in making the mid range deck be able to beat the aggro deck. And so I like
Cool.
lifelink
So
as
it
a
just
choice there.
contributes to White's kind of grindiness in this environment.
Yes, I'm saying that I like the
Yeah.
choice, and I think I don't know if it's a pack filler, but I like the choice of lifelink here over first strike or flying.
Or other certain things.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. We'll move on. We have the Thunder Mane Guardian. It is 1 and a white for a 1/2 creature cat spirit. It has flying, and when it dies, you create a 1/1 white soldier creature token with vigilance. So I've always found this card to be kind of awkward. Um, this is the kind of thing that I would associate with maybe like an aristocrats thing, just because it's not a just because like the body that it's how do I describe this?
So it's like Doom Traveler, but it becomes worse.
Yeah, which is like it's like it's partially going towards this hey please sacrifice me thing, but it's also a 1/2 flyer, which is both like I don't kind of want to sacrifice that. I want to hit my opponent in the face with flyers, and also it's like a flyer, so it's bad at naturally dying, right?
Yeah, and like it. That's so strange.
It's just a very awkward design.
And it's weird to go from I have something in the air to I have something that can attack and then block. Like that transition I think will so often be not significant. When my thing in the air is dying, I'm unlikely to want to chip in and then block.
Yeah, because it means not only do they have a blocker, but it's some sort of flying or reach blocker.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like this is never getting. Nobody's going to point a kill spell at a Stormcrow.
Well, if
Yeah.
if we're looking at, there's a lot of things that I do like that are going on here, or but I do agree with all the points that you guys are making in terms of this is creating multiple blockers for our decks that want blockers. It's creating multiple bodies for our white go wide deck. I just wonder, could we cost it up and get both bodies?
Well, but it's not. Like the go wide deck, I don't think can really utilize this as two
Well,
bodies.
It's
right, and that's why I'm wondering, could we cost it up and just get both bodies at once?
I mean, that's just a completely different design.
well, I would
Right.
argue,
But
Okay.
yeah.
like,
Okay.
I believe this is top down. Like, if you look at the art, it's the lion dude holding a baby.
Okay.
What?
Yeah, you
Holding the
see
The
baby.
baby
baby's
and
not
Guarding the
the
baby.
baby is not the 1/1 white soldier.
no, that he grows up when the
Oh
lion
my
dies.
gosh, that's a stretch.
I,
Well,
bel-
regardless.
I believe, I think it has to be based on a myth or something. Anyway, yeah, if this were a 1/1 ETB make the soldier, that'd be really pushed. But I think
Mm.
testable.
All right, sorry, I gotta take a call in real life. I'm gonna move on to just to show the next card on screen. So when you guys need to move on to talk about that, you can just read it off. Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like it just 2/2 and stats and a lot of.
Oh, you know what? You know what? I'm sorry. Oh gosh, I am an idiot. I muted and deafened myself, so none of that was heard, I think.
I didn't hear your call.
No. The stream didn't hear us.
Yeah, fudge. I am
At
sorry,
all?
guys.
Since the beginning.
Oh god.
Let me check.
So sorry, stream. I meant to just. I'm just so used to deaf muting myself when I leave. I'm assuming that no one was heard there. Well, what were the thoughts you guys had more on the Guardian?
We didn't add much.
Okay, so you moved on to
Other
the
than that,
Imperial Procession.
It like some of the ideas are good. It's a little finicky, and other designs could be looked into.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah. So to summarize what we said about Imperial Procession, it's not amazingly pushed. Like it's a little underpowered, but that it's still a really useful tool since it's an enchantment that makes creatures. So it's good for turning on civilized. It does. It has interesting gameplay in a race, which can be desirable. It actually punishes racing, which is,
Mm.
I think, what the set wants to do.
Yes, this is a very grindy environment.
And I really appreciate it as a positive use of the token that feels very cohesive.
Cool. So overall, we're high on this card.
Yes, very much.
Nice. All right. Well, once again, apologies about that, but let's move on. We have the Order Sworn Savior. Well, that's a real mouthful. Order Sworn Savior. 2 and a white for a 3/2 creature human scout. For 5 and a white, you can return another target non-land permanent you control to its owner's hand. So if you have a lot of mana available, you can use this as a way to recur ETB effects. If you want to pay 5 and a white, bounce some sort of permanent, and play it again. Or if you just are willing to hold up 5 and a white, you can use this to save creatures from removal, from being killed in combat. With you know, if your opponent casts a combat trick and now it would die, now it doesn't, something like that.
So,
What do we think?
I have two thoughts. Man, you know what the invokers didn't do? They didn't do reactive things.
Yes.
My second thought is so just as a way to punish removal when you're not tapped out, I think that's fine. But the recurring and ETB gameplay loop, I think, is a little sketchy for common.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know it's prohibitively costed, but the fact that the gameplay exists concerns me.
Yes, because it will happen at common. You know, if this is a card that people are playing, you know, at least one copy of, maybe in many of their white decks. Even if just as curve filler, it's going to come up, and it might not be very fun. One
sure.
thing to think about is that I feel like this is probably part of the intent, is how it works with discoveries. So discoveries being non-land permanents that stick around for a long time, you can grind just that little bit more value out of them by allowing yourself to get the first and second part of that discovery again. So I imagine that was kind of what was going on here, but like we said, this is vastly more likely to be used in the ways that we previously described.
I feel
think.
like for the design intent, if it is what you think, I would almost prefer it to be an ETB, for just if you draw late game, you can grind out value.
Mm-hmm.
Like white overcost or undercosted things where you have to bounce a creature exist.
Right.
I'm sorry, I don't have much to add.
No, that's
Cleo,
fine.
did you have any thoughts?
Not to go into it too much, I'm okay with a few of those grindy effects for as the player doing them, it feels like I think that old school Magic grind out feeling is fun. And when you for that player, I know it isn't for your opponent as long as those effects do end the game soon. But as soon as you suggested it being an ETB, that's even more exciting in a lot of ways for I think the player who is getting that. We had a 2-mana 2/2 who did that in Kaladesh that was very enjoyable to play with and it never felt too disgusting when you got them looping.
The aviary mechanic.
Yes, and he was quite good and has seen pop-up play.
I mean, that's a little bit more excited because they were you
you
had to A plus B it, or I guess A plus A it.
Yeah, but then again, I know that we have some other effects that are like this in blue, and from what I've seen of the set, getting him online with a good target should end the game very quickly. And I don't think we're in the danger of it being like, oh, this hasn't happened for 7 turns in a row. It's more of this will happen once or twice, and then the game is.
Okay, so maybe you'll want to point out some of those ETBs when we get to them, the kind of major ones.
Maybe pushing the mana cost up and flickering it so it's on board and you get the effect immediately, so the game ends even faster, might be a better execution if we're going for that.
And it's more clear than exactly what is meant to be happening.
Yeah. Because I do come back to the invokers you were talking about, and one of the things we like about them is that, like, yes, it's expensive, but it does end the game. You're not sitting there having your creatures tapped every turn 5 turns in a row. It just kind of happens once, and then you died, right? And it wasn't this long drawn out affair, which is what we wanted.
And you think Flicker would speed that up?
Yeah, because you don't have to recast it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And especially that would it incentivizes doing it on bigger creatures that have bigger ETB effects as well.
Yes,
because
you're like you can recast
you're like, bounce my 5-drop, you know,
right.
but you're like, Flicker my 5-drop, sure.
Right, but then again, the aviary, a 3-mana 3/2 aviary mechanic's pretty sweet. Like that's definitely a card players are going to be excited to draft and find synergies for with their discoveries or with the enchantment that we literally looked at just above it. Like I'm going to play that with the aviary mechanic and be very and feel good about it, right?
Yeah.
And not have to wait until turn 9 to do it, and just to get 2 1/1s, right? I just get it immediately. And so I think that might be. I think, yeah, I like what we're trying to do, but I think I agree with both of you that we could do it a little smoother.
Cool. All right, let's move on to the next card. We have the Sire of Sonuria. It is 2 and a white for a 2/3 creature, Lamassu. I think this is the first of the Lamassu we've seen in the set. I believe there's a lot of them in the set. Pretty decently represented creature type. And this one has Civilized. Sire of Sonuria has flying as long as you control an artifact, a creature, and an enchantment. So from just a 3-mana 2/3 to a 3-mana 2/3 with flying, which is a pretty big bonus there. What do you think? Simon.
Yeah. I think it's gameplay-wise, I enjoy this. It is a hard to deal with Windrake, but conditional and arguably, like, you can deal with the artifact, the enchantment, or the creature itself. So it's actually
very interactable.
Yeah, I really enjoy the numbers here. It's just a nice card. I really enjoy commons with a high floor, low ceiling like this. I find it strange that a Lamassu is not always flying, but I don't understand the lore behind them that well, so that might just be me.
I also think that's strange. I mean, it's just one of those things where the art is kind of, in many ways, more important than what you might know about this creature otherwise. And this is just very clearly a creature that has giant wings, and it's probably going to fly around all the time. Of course, the flavor text does describe a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
So that's cool stuff. I really enjoy this as like you said before, a hard to deal with Windrake, but it also means like a fairly reliable win condition for a common creature. Like where you're in the civilized deck, it's getting evasion. It's slightly harder to burn or murder to death than a lot of flyers we see. And it doesn't feel bad just playing it on curve without civilized on its main mode anyways, if you know that you're going to be upgrading it later. You're just saying, hey, I don't like your pikers, I don't like your bears, get them away from me, please.
So, you wanting this to be able to chip in and close out or help close a game, bring it to a conclusion,
Mm-hmm.
I think is another reason to not want that land aura. Like this specific design doing what it wants to do.
Oh, you're right. Well, yeah, like the gaining 2 life a turn is just like, hey, screw you, Sire Scenaria in the
Yeah,
civilized mirror. Ugh. Yeah, that sounds like a garbage fire.
Chapelgeist is, if we're going to compare it to like Chapelgeist is the 3-mana 2/3 in Innistrad.
Mhm.
Was quite good, and Magic's come a long way. And I think that this is completely reasonable at this mana cost. It gives you. It doesn't get. I think that it's a card that is never going to make me go into Civilized, but that the player who's playing a Civilized deck should get late in draft. And I like commons that reward me like that are on curve and
Mhm.
can match up well. As long as the 2/3 is matching up well against the creatures, I think that the card is good.
Sure.
This has a nice Lorado quality where it's trash art, but it's like good enough that I don't mind. It's like
It's
inoffensively bad.
fitting, and it's just
Well,
kind of pleasant
yeah,
in
it's like
texture.
soft strokes and colors.
Yeah.
Rather, it doesn't draw attention to its poor qualities.
Interesting.
Nice lighting helps.
Thank you, art director Simon. All right, cool. Well, we like that one. Let's move on. We have the Spear of Lyceria. It is 2 and a white for an artifact equipment. And when it enters the battlefield, or sorry, this means colored equipment in the set. Just another way to have draftable enablers for Civilized. When it enters the battlefield, you may destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and equip 2. So this is a card that I've described my distaste to Matt before. And it's mostly just an issue of that this is too niche of an effect to feel good as a card that you're drafting purely to enable Civilized. You're looking at this card and you're saying, hey, this is an artifact that's in white. I'm in a white-based Civilized deck. That sounds like something that I should be really interested in, that I should be reliably considering to be an important part of my deck. But then it goes and drops this extremely swingy effect on me. What do you guys think about that?
So, I think when this is played, it can just be miserable because your opponent doesn't just get a removal spell to kill your most relevant
They
creature.
get value and a value engine afterwards.
Well, then, and the irony when you equip this to a creature with 3 power and become a target for it. But I just don't like. So I agree with you that it doesn't necessarily fill the purpose of enabling civilized easier by having a main boardable artifact that isn't picked up by every deck, which is why it's colored. I just and I don't like it when it is played.
I mean that is kind of the nature of extremely swingy cards in a certain sense, and that's why that's why we try to keep them out of common as designers, is because when they're not played they're trash, when they are played they're bonkers, and that just kind of feels bad if for something that should theoretically be happening all the time as a common.
I feel like a similar effect for similar is a strong word, could just be tapping creatures when it enters the battlefield, like 2 creatures and be efficiently costed. Then it might be picked up by the red-white aggressive deck, which I don't think going between civilized and the aggressive decks is necessarily undesirable.
Yeah, it's not like a death knell to the idea.
Yeah. it can still go around the table somewhat easily.
Hmm.
I do want to say the positive that I really like using colored equipment as a way to enable civilized. I think that that's really nice. But I completely agree that, and not only is it swingy, but it also creates these really feel bad situations where I want to enable civilized, but I also want
To
to hold
wait.
this until it has a target. I also
Mhm.
want, if I have the mana, I want to play it and equip it. And so having it be redesigned to be an ability that when I have it, when I'm at this spot of my curve, I'm always going to want to play this card. I'm
Mhm.
not saying, I'm not offering necessarily what that is, but a card that answers that question, I think would be much more desirable in this slot. I'm interested to see, because I think they have changed since I last looked, what are other common equipment.
Mhm. All right, cool. Let us move on. We have Wander the Wasteland. It is 2 and a white for an enchantment. And when it enters the battlefield, exile target creature until Wander the Wasteland leaves the battlefield. So we were talking a little bit before about that the only O-ring we've ever seen before at common was Isolation Zone in Battle for Zendikar. And this is here an O-ring at common, enchantment enabling civilized. What do we think?
I reminded of when I was talking with Philemon about putting Isolation Zone as a reprint, and he thought it was strange that Isolation Zone targeted enchantments as well. And I told him that it was there specifically to target other copies of Isolation Zone. If you're only going to hit creatures with your O-ring at common, I think at that point it should be an arrest or pacifism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no reason for this to be an O-ring, other than perhaps the reason that he might have another aura, like he might have a pacifism and this. If that were the case, though, that would just be way too many hard removal spells in white, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I have anything to add. I think you guys covered it completely.
Cool. One
We-
thing I wanted to talk about was wait, never mind.
That's my favorite topic.
Sorry, I just realized that he had fixed the thing I was going to talk about. Cool. Let's move on. Our next card we have Break the Code. It is 2 white for an instant. Destroy target attacking or blocking creatures. So yet another, semi-hard removal here. And then Civilized. If you control an artifact or creature and enchantment, draw a card. So if Civilized, it's a 2-for-1. What do we think?
I'm not so. I dislike this not just because it's a 2-for-1 at common, but I'm not sure I like the reward for having civilized being drawing a card. Um, like you have played 2 cards that probably didn't affect the board that much. You have a creature. You are 1-for-1ing your opponent. Drawing a card just seems massively win more here and doesn't
Mm.
actually contribute to ending the game.
Yeah, it's
Or
win more in
supplementing.
a even dirtily sense.
Yeah,
Which is
and it
strange.
doesn't supplement playing 2 non-creatures to enable it either, by giving you board state.
What would you want? What kind of effect would you want to see here, Simon?
I mean, I would argue that I don't want to see civilized as a bonus on top of a removal spell. If it was like make the removal spell remove more things, maybe, but I don't want it ever to be you kill something and then you get another bonus.
I'm reminded
Personally
of
speaking.
I can't remember the name of the card, but it was a single white for an instant. Tap target creature. If you control 3 or more artifacts,
Mm-hmm.
exile it. Um, although that
I
card,
think he has that design in the set as an uncommon
okay, I was
for
about to say,
civilized.
although that's very swingy, I think overall that might be more desirable just for being like early game. It allows you to stall, and your late game reward is it being more than stalling. It although that doesn't bring the game to a conclusion, it does. The reward is there, and it's more than simply dirtling.
Mm-hmm. It
But
gives you like a big tempo bonus late in the game.
yeah, and not those numbers necessarily, but that idea.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if that's completely desirable either. I think I'm also wary of I'm wary of any mechanic that asks you to have a certain amount of board state on removal spells,
Mm-hmm.
because that gets into very snowball-y win war scenarios.
Because it means not only do I have stuff, you now no longer have stuff.
Yeah.
Well, from a draft perspective, I think that I agree with you guys that I don't like having civilized on removal spells because it also like this is a removal. It's a removal spell, so I'm going to take it early, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the fact of the matter is, I'm going to play this card and
In
should
every
play this
white
card
deck.
in every white deck.
Yeah.
But the card is telling me I'm supposed to be civilized, and I actually think the more we talk about it, I dislike that. If you're going to have it on removal, I do like the draw a card as a reward. If you're going to do it and you want to have that you're going to eat the red flag, you're going to do the 2-for-1. It's a kind of reward that as a player you feel very rewarded for. Players love drawing cards. And so the player who gets to draw a card off of it does feel quite good.
It needs
about
to be
that,
actually a payoff for putting in the work.
right. But
Something that you're doing.
with that said, I do 100% believe. I think that removing it from the removal would make the draft better and make white feel better as a color in draft.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right, let us move on. We have Darutu's Kindred. It is 3 and a white for a 2/5 creature, Spirit Ox. It's vanilla. This is continuing to contribute to white's very, very dirtily nature in the set. It's just a big honkin' wall of an ox. What do you think?
I love that art, even though it evokes a much more I want to say intense tone than the set does normally. Mechanically, I'm sure this fits the gameplay speed that Matt is going for.
Mm-hmm. Any thoughts, Cleo?
Looks good. No,
It's not. It's a vanilla. There's not much to talk about.
Yeah, I mean a 2/5 is a good blocker in a control deck.
Spirit Ox is a fun type line.
Yeah, I mean it's not a 2/4; it is a 2/5. That guy's blocking a lot of things on the ground.
Oh yeah.
I imagine that he is better than he looks.
So actually, on the topic of being a 2/5, is it desirable that this is hard for the creatures that grow? Like, White has many creatures that grow from playing set mechanics and setting.
Mm-hmm.
Is it desirable that this stonewalls them? Or do we want to have the gameplay where this overcomes the ops? Notably 4 mana.
I don't know. I think that's something that honestly we just need to look at more of the set to know. Like, what are the creatures that are overcoming this? You know, if we see a lot of 5-powered creatures or things that become 5-power, I think we can reasonably rest assured that this is going to be killed in combat.
That's fair.
You know, like obviously, and you know, like white's not the color in which you're going to see that. So, but yeah. It also depends on what evasion there is. Like we've seen 2 white flyers so far, one of which is the really awkward, it wants to die, not really putting on very much pressure. The other one, which is only conditional.
The Windrake does overcome it, or the 2/3.
Yes, and but the 2/3 flyer is very good for getting past that. So we'll just have to see what we see on like the higher mana cost flyer, if there is one. But let's move on to the next card. We have Drive Back. It is 2 white for a sorcery. Tap target creature. Creatures you control get +2/+1 until end of turn. So this is the go wide team buff of choice. Your best blocker is now gone. Maybe a Darutu's Kindred, for example, is now out of the way. 5 left toughness on the board, and your team is now swole. What do we think?
So I love this design. I love the numbers on it, and I really want to cast this. I think it is. No, I think this is perfectly pushed for common overrun.
Hmm.
Other than one concern I have, that should either say target creature you don't control or up to one target creature.
Because you never want to be in the situation where they don't have a board. You want to cast this to kill them this turn, but you have to tap one of your own creatures.
Yeah.
You also don't want the spell to get countered. In the current wording, if the creature that I'm tapping is killed in response,
The
spell would
spell
be
fizzles. Wow.
that would be a fizzle. So like
That's
if I go to tap the creature that they can sacrifice,
ugh.
If that it now I don't believe aristocrats is a set theme, so it will be happening less often.
absolutely,
Yeah.
Is a
absolutely.
concern.
But if it ever did, like my God, that'd be awful. So if you do tap up to one, that lets you not choose a target to avoid the fizzle, but does it also stop it from fizzling if they remove the target?
No,
It does
no,
not,
it would still
right?
fizzle. If
Okay.
you wanted to design around it being able to fizzle,
You would not target.
you could add a second target to the spell. So if it was tap
Creature,
up to one creature target player
creatures.
control,
Oh,
or if
a
it
little
was
awkward.
tap target creature you don't control, target creature you control, and other creatures you control.
Or
I know it's a bad
creature's
example.
target player controls get.
Yes, yes.
That would probably be
If you're
best.
targeting yourself, then it won't fizzle.
Yeah.
Because even if the creature does.
So something to workshop, basically.
Great art. Love this art. Like,
Yes, this is good.
Absolutely love the art.
Oh yeah, this is oh man, I really want Raymond Swanland to redo this art, but that's half the reason this art is so exciting.
You're
Just
talking
a
about
great art
because of
choice.
the angle and like the right, top right to bottom left motion
And I
line.
really want to see Raymond Swanland do more sand,
Mm-hmm.
but that's a tangent.
Cool stuff. All right, let's move on. We have the Rabudan Chiseler. It is 3 and a white for a 3/3 creature, human artificer. Whenever an artifact or enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 3 life. I mean, with the aura that gains life, gnarly, right? Like not actually though, but like that feels really good for you. Probably pretty bad for the opponent.
I 3/3s block really well, and
Mm-hmm.
the word "whenever" here is super concerning.
Yeah, if I remember correctly,
I
this
think if
has
this
been
was
buffed.
when it enters, when Rabudan Chiseler enters the battlefield, if you control an artifact or enchantment, gain 3 life might be more desirable.
I mean, that sounds like that would just be a civilized.
Or yeah, when
Yeah.
it enters, if civilized, gain 3 life.
Yeah.
And that's still like 4
That's
mana
fine.
3/3, gain 3 life is not bad.
It's completely fine. Yeah.
Like it helps a slow civilized deck a lot.
Mm-hmm. Especially because if you're curving from like the equipment we saw before, if that's staying at 2 or 3 mana, curving that into this, or you played an aura, that might just feel a little better. Because I remember definitely this card was in its previous incarnation, I believe it was like 2 life per artifact or enchantment, and people just were not picking it. And I think adding an ETB might be the
It's very feast or famine in its current incarnation.
yeah.
Because part of that also comes from like to be honest, most white decks don't actually want a 4-mana 3/3. I think that even in a civilized deck, I want to be doing something. I'd rather play a 4-mana 2/5, right, in my slow control deck than a 4-mana 3/3.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm going to play him, I'm playing him because I'm expecting him to trigger. So if he triggers twice, that's a ton. If he triggers no times, I probably lost.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of this like feast or famine kind of.
Yeah, it's a little weird.
Going back into art direction tyrant mode, which is totally what the stream is about. I when I personally see this, all I can see is the historical figure Sargon of Akkad. I can't actually see anything related to Rabudan or a Chiseler, really. Like
Hmm?
it
I, I don't think the vast majority of people will know what Sarkhan of Akkad looks like.
But so I'm going to disagree with you a little because there is a somewhat well-known YouTuber who uses the historical figure as their
Oh,
man.
really? Huh.
Yes.
Interesting.
And which does make them more prominent amongst. Well, and if presumably people who are fans of, uh, older civilizations will want to be fans of this set.
Mm-hmm.
And this can really take them out of this setting. It crosses the line from inspired by history and making something new with it into just doing it.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Do you think
It's
that
not
that
a
turns
huge
it?
deal, and I understand that the art for Babylos is
There's
struggling to
constraints.
find,
Yeah.
since it's not as popular as other things.
Hmm. Do you think that brings it from? Do you think that that's a reason maybe to hey try not to use the art or try to use it on like an uncommon, for example?
I think it's avoid if possible. It's not the end of the world. It's just a a place to optimize.
Okay. Cool. Let us go to the next one. We have the Greyhorn Instructor. It is 3 white for a 3/3 creature, Goat Artificer. So we have goat people in this plane. It has lifelink, and when it enters the battlefield, return a target artifact or enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand. What do we think? This is fairly efficient for a white 5-drop.
Incredibly efficient. I've
Yeah,
played a 5-mana 3/4 lifelink before, and like he was your 20th 21st card, but in the deck that played him, he was a damn good 20th card.
like this is an Oromancer that had like can trade up more often and has lifelink.
But
I almost think this is too grindy for common.
I mean,
just because it's getting you back a card that's a 2-for-1, it's gaining you life. That's value.
Like I think if this was 4 and white and didn't have lifelink, it would still be fine. As it is, I think with how much the set is trying to push artifacts and enchantments, although it is also a reason to push an Oromancer type card that brings them back, I think that just crosses the line from this being a little clunky and normal set to just potentially too much for a 5-drop.
Mm-hmm.
I think having strong payoff cards is good. I could see another execution working better, but having a card like this,
3-power lifelink is just so distracting. Right?
Go ahead.
Sorry, 3-power lifelink is just so distracting from the fact that this is an enabler or a payoff or whatever. You know what I mean? Just a synergy piece. Like that. That's the part that just takes this and says, "Hey, this is now more powerful than it should be for no reason."
Yeah.
But yeah. Do we have any other thoughts on this?
I'm good.
All right. Cool. So that's the first of White's 2 5-drops in the set. That's a little weird. We have Lyseria's Warden. It's 4 and a white for a 3/4 creature bird soldier, bird people, and it's flying. Just a kind of a classic 5-mana 3/4 flyer that we've seen in the past. What do we think?
It ends games. I appreciate that for compared to a lot of the cards here.
It blocks well, it attacks well, it gives you a reward for going green-white ramp. It gives you a reward for going either the blue-white or black-white control decks in terms of being a common that is probably going to come around late. I think it's great. I like it. And it's easy on the mana base. I don't know how much that matters, but when we played before, 3/4 flyer is pretty massive in this format. In the sky, there aren't a whole lot of ways to handle that. And a lot of the removal only handles 2 or 3 toughness creatures. And so it's a legitimate finisher and common. that should table and go to the decks that want it. And so I think that's good. I like all that.
Cool.
That poor art, it is never not going to be used.
This art is used in a lot of environments. Ay, ay, ay. All right, so now we have finished talking about each individual card in white. Now we have a chance to look a little bit over the curve of white, both in terms of like how many cards are at different mana costs, but also kind of how many different kinds of effects we're seeing, especially in terms of like how the archetypes are being supported. So definitely, I think that the go wide is the biggest question mark here. I'm only really seeing one solid enabler for that in the Imperial Procession, and then the really solid payoff.
Right. I mean, I think that if you scroll to the wolf or the lion, is supposed to also be a payoff for that archetype.
Yeah.
Which for me, and I think we talked about it, I kind of want to see both those bodies come at once to help that archetype.
Yeah, the the Stormcrow, just making this design closer to sorcerer's speed raise the alarm. I think just definitely would help the go wide archetype have more of a presence. I agree.
Cool. Are we seeing any other problems?
Well, there's also supposed to be a green white ramp deck, and I see a ramp payoff and a 3/4 flyer for 5. I see a removal spell that ramp wants and destroying a attacking creature. I don't really see.
I mean, the Great Horn Instructor
is
valuable enough, just because there's enough artifacts and enchantment stuff going on in the set in general that even if you're in green white, I think you can still get a lot of value out of Great Horn Instructor.
I think it's worth noting that there's also a blue-green ramp archetype that's meant to splash a lot of colors. I suspect that green-white ramp is kind of being consumed by that, and it's really
the blue-green might be like, hey, look at Lyseria's Warden, that looks tasty.
Well, think about our Devastation, where it wasn't any color and green ramp. It was just green eye-fixing ramp.
I mean, but I guess I mean is if you're gonna if green white is ramp, I kind of want to see a cartographer or a tide, so, or whatever a common version of a survival cache would be. I want to see something that is really going to help my white deck, the white half of my deck.
Oh, I suspect that's what the large activated ability was for.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes, that's what that was.
Yes, that's true. An Invoker does help that ramp deck because he comes down on curve and then gives you a finisher.
That's one of the few ways you can really do that for white at common, since it's not supposed to get large creatures.
So we're thinking though that green white seems like that's mostly doing its stuff here, other than perhaps the issue of like the color weight on the Warden versus the Instructor or something like that, where the Warden premier card but maybe too much snapped up by blue-green.
Well, and I think that there's some agreement that we want to see a little bit less feast or famine on the civilized archetype, in terms of both the life gainer, in terms of the shield wall.
Less swinginess.
A little bit less is swingy the term there. Yeah, a little bit less swingy, a little bit more. Yeah,
sure.
And yeah, I think that's all I got. I'm good on it.
Cool, but overall, this is looking, I'd say, pretty good. Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, this is not that far. All right.
I think we've been critical, but in general, the set sells. It feels like its own world. White seems very alive.
Oh yeah, there's a lot. There's cool stuff going on in these white cards.
Absolutely, and I've never seen a Magic set that takes me to this world, and I want to just make sure that we get the positive in there as well in terms of, especially I think the premier white card that really sells the color is the enchantment that makes the 2/1/1 Babylos. The art is great, the feeling of it is great, and it goes.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah,
I appreciate that Babylos shows more than it tells.
Yeah.
I remember a similar set by M. Zapsky, Rise and Fall, which was going for a similar theme and aesthetic. A lot of similar motifs, more importantly. Which, like, it was about the rise and fall of societies. Think Rome to when Rome fell. or ancient Greece to Greece today. And it did a lot of telling and not a lot of showing.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate the reverse here. It makes it easier to get immersed.
Cool stuff. All right, let's move on to the next color. Are we good to do blue?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's move on to blue. We have our first card. It's a null. Blue, instant, counter target artifact or enchantment spell. I wonder why this is here. What are our thoughts? So we had a little bit of qualms with the efficiency of the white common artifact enchantment removal spell. Do we have similar problems here?
Yes. Personally, I don't see a cheap way for me to be, as the civilized player, necessarily like, what is my annul for the indoor deck?
No, as much as that's true, I do want to emphasize that this actually isn't like in limited. You should never play this. It is far too narrow since your opponent has to play. You have to be able to hold up one mana.
You can't draw into this to answer their artifact
You
enchantment.
have to be able to hold up one mana, have drawn this before your opponent plays something worth 1-for-1ing. And then your opponent,
But
it's really narrow, but I do agree that gameplay isn't amazing here. I would consider another narrow card that you usually don't play in limited, like Negate, to fill a similar role.
as a sideboard card, though,
feel bad.
Well, it's hard to even bring in from the sideboard.
but you're talking about trading a 1-mana card for 4 and 5 mana cards. When your annul hits, you're looking.
I mean, we saw like the premier enchantments in white were 3 mana, for example.
Well, did we do the uncommons in white?
No.
Well, it's still like when you're
In white commons,
casting that, you have to have drawn this and have not tapped out, and then
And even
they
then,
have
it
to
probably
play it.
it may not be end up worth it.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing with that side of it. It's the other side of it when you do get to trade a 1-mana, because like you're not talking about trading, a 3 or 4 mana modern day removal spell for a 3 or 4 mana spell. You're talking about trading a 1-mana spell for a 4 or 5 mana spell in terms of or 3 to 5 mana. So you're gaining
there is
a massive tempo advantage.
Yeah, so we're saying once again that it's a little too swingy, and something like a negate would be infinitely less.
Yes,
Yeah.
because negate's trading 2 mana for absolutely.
Do you think this might be here just for constructed purposes?
If that's the case, then it's a good inclusion.
I suppose. Two notes though, aren't completely related to design. Matt, I understand counterspell art is hard, but when in doubt, just do something dynamic.
That's something cool looking.
Like the art should be a verb, not a noun, on instants and sorceries, and this is very much a noun. This is land art. This is it doesn't have to look like a counterspell. It just has to look like things are happening.
Yes.
Also, in MSC, if you're using one of Cajun's frames, I would play with chop top, chop. Oh wait, enchantment is too long for that. Ignore me.
You're trying to say to get it on one line, but it wouldn't. Yeah.
Yeah, because I know for naturalizes they make the text a lot smaller to make the line break less awkward, but I'm not sure you can do that here.
All right. Well, so yeah, some stuff to fix there. Let us move on. We have the Crook of Balassi. Is blue for an artifact equipment. When it enters the battlefield, you may tap target creature. It doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and equip 2. So this is kind of funny coming off of a little bit of what we were talking about with suggestions to fix the white equipment, which was tapping stuff. And here we go, blue coming in with that. freezing a creature, giving you a little bit of tempo bonus on the board, and then giving you the value bonus at the end with the equipment. What do you think about it? I love this.
So yeah, I also love this. I do want to note, Matt, if you agree that you want to change the white one and you think you don't want to tap creatures because it overlaps with the blue one, this could be costed to be an like 2 mana, so it's an unsummon, and that's one way to make them more different. If that crossed your mind. With that said, I think this does its job quite well for an aggressive blue deck. Uh, the non-creatures matters prowess deck in blue-red specifically, and I just adore this art. It is a little comic booky for the set, but
It's also a little
overall,
sci-fi. His left arm is like a robot arm.
I believe that's just like a gauntlet. Well, even though
Wait.
just what it
Oh,
depicts is
never mind.
fantastic. The
I misread that.
Prince of Persia scarf going on there is great.
It's good stuff. Cool. Thoughts, Cleo?
I think the card's great. I actually think the card is pushed.
It's a little good. Like, it's not insane, but yeah, it's good.
No, it's not insane.
Yeah.
It's completely reasonable. It's completely reasonable, and I think Wizards could print it. I think at 1 mana for this effect, it is pushed.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let us move on.
With equip too, and I like that. I like this being a push blue comic.
Yes.
Like, I like what that says about the set. I like how that pushes civilized, and I like how that pushes blue red.
Yes. All right. We have It's Opt. It's a card that people play sometimes.
I'm reminded of LSP saying it's a very good, like a very decent card that he has trouble making room for in decks. Like, it never hurts an environment. I don't think it even shapes an environment unless it
has like scry matters or something.
Yeah, like Theros had that, or maybe if you have a lot of prowess, where this could be used as a combat trick, but I think that's rare.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just a basic core set reprint.
Yeah, might be a slot that's needed by something else, but for right now, there's not really much to say. Cool.
Yep.
Let's move on.
Yep.
And anything.
Yep.
We have River Douse, 1 in a blue for an enchantment aura with flash, and when it enters the battlefield, draw a card. The enchanted creature gets -1, -0.
Okay, so this swings combat math in your favor and enable with civilized.
Mm-hmm. At instant speed, even.
Yeah.
Which is pretty easy. I actually really like this as an aura that's very likely to stick around. Just because you're giving the creature -1, -0, which means it's like it has less incentive to just to get involved in combat because it's not doing as much. Actually, as I was saying that, I realized it's not really that much of the case. Basically, it's just like removal auras in general do a good job of doing that in a satisfying way. This one's a little bit too much like a combat trick.
I don't know if Matt is counting red flags, but I would personally count this as a red flag.
Yeah.
Simply because it's doing 3 things. It has flash, it cantrips, and it gives something -1, -0. Like, when a common is doing like 3 separate things, that's usually red flag worthy regardless of line.
Yeah.
This is a card that I think that the intent is clear, and I like that, but I definitely keep my eye on it. If it, because like I think really what this card comes down to is the enchantment sticking around.
Yeah, it's
like,
a little weird.
If this is coming out a lot of the times in situations where it does stick around to enable civilizing cantrips and doing so, then I like the card. If there's a lot of morph on morph 2/2 on 2/2 action going on in combat, then I would redesign the card into something else. So if there's a lot of situations where I'm using it as a
as a 2-for-1,
yeah, essentially as that 2-for-1, and not having it stick around, then I think that it's not functioning as is. But that's not something.
So in 3 out of 4 of the blue decks are supposed to be very slow. In the slow ones, this is very rarely going to turn combat math in your favor.
Right.
I mean,
In-
that's
in the
almost an
blue-red-
argument against removing Flash.
Well,
You know.
that's true. And in the blue-red prowess deck, if you have prowess creature, this swings combat math by removing a point of power, gaining a point of toughness, and a power. So it will very often, or much more often, be a 2-for-1 in that scenario. And, after you do that, it just discourages, prowess's natural threat of activation.
Well, if you remove Flash though, what are you costing it down to 1 mana? Like,
Yeah, I think it's
or it gives
like,
-2 nego.
If either of those, I think it is a reasonable card.
Mm-hmm.
If it was a 1 mana, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Possibly more desirable, just so it does encourage it sticking around more.
I mean, the set also already has a 1 mana blue cantrip.
In Opt, true. But I imagine Opt isn't essential to the set, and that could change. Sorry, go ahead, Cleo.
I actually disagree with all your points. I absolutely agree with that. I think that I would rather see it not be Flash, so that it's more likely to stick around, and adjust the mana cost and Opt. Like if that moved Opt into whatever a telling time that is acceptable to print be, that I think that'd be fine.
Okay.
At the cost of making it more likely to stick around for Civilized, because that is the intent. We actually don't want it to win the combat for the Civilized. We want it to help me get Civilized online.
Yeah. I mean, it's okay if it does both of those things, but yeah, set mechanics, set themes, and all that. All right, I think we're good on that one. Let's move on. We now have the Sonurian Architect. It is 1 and a blue for a 1/3 creature bird artificer. It is flying. When it enters the battlefield, if you have Civilized, so if you control an artifact, a creature, and enchantment, you draw a card. So this is like a premier bonus. This is just a premier card for blue-based Civilized decks, because it's a playable body on its own, just walls as a 2-drop, and even just becomes a way to win the game if you need it to be as a flyer. And then if you have Civilized, it cantrips. That's crazy. What do we think?
I really dislike design. It's very much. It feels to me very much the opposite of the white one. Whereas the white one, I really like the intent of an early blocker with a body that's going to help me stick in the game.
Mm-hmm.
This discourages me. Like if I have an artifact in play, and I have this card in hand,
And you don't have an enchantment.
right? The tension of, do I play it now to get a blocker, get an attacker, or do I hold this until turn 5 after I play my 4 mana enchantment? I don't like that tension. That is not tension that for me as a player I find rewarding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Simon, do you have any thoughts?
Simon? What do you think, Simon?
Yes, sorry, I was not hitting my push to talk key because I know how to read. I think there's a lot of room for this type of design, actually, but at uncommon. And one of the reasons I say that is in limited, like Cleo said, it is very finicky and does have a lot of tension. But as a constructed plant, I actually enjoy this a lot. It's similar to Augur Bolas, which is a 1 and a blue for 1/3. And it's like when it enters, look at the top 3 cards of your library. You can put a
Instant sorcery.
Instant or sorcery from there into your hand. And this does a similar thing for like a control or mid-range deck where it can just be a decent value creature. Like it is a civilized constructed plant more than a limited card, in my opinion.
Which does, of course, mean that we would prefer it not to be a common.
Yeah, I think at common it does create more tension and feel bad than I would personally enjoy.
Yeah, because there is the desire to play it on 2, wait, you get civilized later, bonus occurs. But that's not what happens.
It's not like you can play 2-drop turn 2, then play this turn 3 and have civilized on very often. You're going to play this late if civilized is on. usually turn 5, turn 6, and
Yeah.
still doesn't feel great.
Yeah, it still feels a little like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have to be like a kind of good player to even realize that that's kind of what you're supposed to be doing with it. You know, so I think especially low skill players have an annoying time with this. You know. Not to call you low skill, Cleo. All right, let's move on to the next card. We have Scholar of the Epics. It is 1 and a blue for a 2/1 creature human wizard. It's a vanilla. Blue's vanilla is a piker. Is there anything to think?
It's fine for filler in every set. I was going to say it's odd that it's aggressively slanted, but it's not really. You just hikers when you need 2 drops. And I'm sure blue's defensively slanted creatures, but like the last 2 drop on cards with rule text.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy the grandiose flavor for such a simple card. It's indicative of the setting.
Yes, I like it because especially it says, the epics and scholarly activities are something that a lot of people are getting involved with. Like there isn't just one scholar of the epics. It's just that there's hundreds of scholars that care about these books. They're just normal people. I think that is cool.
Seems fine. Yeah. I don't think I have anything to add.
Cool. Let us move on. We have the Canvas Street Markets. It's 2 and a blue for an enchantment aura. Enchant land. Enchanted land has tap, draw a card, then discard a card. So yet again, we're seeing a land aura as an enabler for Civilized. This one is the same. There was a Return to Ravnica card that was this at uncommon at a different mana cost, correct? Or was it also common?
In Street Market, which was rummaging and much more expensive. That was like 4 into red.
Yes, at common.
But I think Merfolk Looter is a very, very powerful card, and that's 1 in a blue for 1/1 tap, draw a card, then discard a card.
Mm-hmm.
And this is 1 more mana than Merfolk Looter, but can't be interacted with as easily as Merfolk Looter.
Mm-hmm.
So this...
And it also costs you 1 to tap it every time, because it goes on a land.
It does cost you a mana to tap it every time. I think if... I'm going to defend this being testable, actually, because you do have to pay mana every turn to use it, which makes it...
it's not a one-time investment. It is a continual investment.
Unlike Merfolk Looter. And you really do want to push Civilized enablers. And it's not like the Civilized deck can steal the game with this too easily, since it has to cast its expensive cards a lot of the time with spot drops.
This isn't gaining you any tempo. This isn't gaining you card advantage.
Yeah, it's just selection. And it is a little above the curve of what we normally see. It is closer to Merfolk Looter, which is obviously a card we don't see printed in standard sets anymore, than it is to Goblin Rummager. But I think there is room for that, especially in custom Magic.
Sure.
I think this is perfectly testable, but should be watched carefully.
Any thoughts, Cleo?
I agree with, I think, a lot of Simon is saying in terms of it being testable. Especially the point that you made, Simon, about how the control decks, like looting is certainly going to help them, but it's not a deck that's going to have a whole bunch of extra cards until very, very, very late in the game, at which point the effects should help close the game out. And so I am interested in seeing it tested and seeing how it plays. It could actually, unlike the white card, Enchant Land, I like the costing of it being in Enchant Land. I did play some Tin Street Market, which was a common. You would play it sometimes as like your 21st, 22nd card, and having this cost less and be more powerful, I don't think is problematic because Tin Street Market was not.
Oh yeah, I shoved the card in so many decks and it's just so bad.
Cool. All right, let us move on. We have Golguz's Scoundrel. It is 2 and a blue for a 2/3 creature human rogue with prowess. It's for the prowess deck. There's not really much to say, I don't think. It's more, it'll start to get more into if we start looking at more of the creatures in blue and in red where prowess is. There's a curve there. But just on its own, it's just a very, very normal prowess creature in blue.
My only note is that if Matt finds someone to add a mechanic or a piece of rules text to blue somewhere, this is a good place to do it. You can have 2/3 for 2 with prowess and blue at common with upside. We've had there's that one Scab in Shadows of Innistrad.
And he was very good. He was very good.
True, it was very good, but it's this with Flowstone, where you can pay generic to give it +1/-1 EOT. Not that this should have upside, but if you want to add something to blue, this is a solid place to do it.
Sure.
Just set design-wise.
Cool. Let's move on. We have Invoke the Tablets. It is 3 and a blue for an instant. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 3. Scry 1. So we see our second counter spell of the format. It is a mostly hard counter spell with a little bit of upside for just in single blue. No double blue cost here. What do we think?
Cleo, what do you think?
What do I think of this card? I don't think I've played enough of the format to give. There's been some formats with 3-mana counters have been quite good, and some formats with 3-mana counters are very bad. I feel as though a lot of that has to do with where the rest of our format is and what's going on in turns 1 and 2, especially when you are on the draw, and how far behind, how much of a cost it is to leave this up.
Strictly speaking, power level, I know the card Convolute, 2 and a blue, counter target spell unless it's
3 and a blue. Or sorry, never mind. Never mind.
No, Convolute, 2 and blue. Counter target spell unless it's controller pays 4 generic is not a great card in limited. Limited is slow enough that a lot of the time they can pay that for.
Yeah, it's a weird situation where we're saying like it's a slower format, so therefore 3-mana counters are good, but this is also worse than we normally see for this kind of effect, and is also worse in the slower the format is. It becomes very slow. It's not very good.
Generally in limited, you don't want to spend like turn 3 or turn 4 countering a spell, because if they don't do anything, you just lost tempo. And best case scenario, you got a 1-for-1, and you might even be behind on mana compared to them.
Right. It's also like
you can't like play a 2-drop and then hold up this 3-mana counter spell, because at that point they can definitely for it.
Well, in defense of this counterspell with the games that we played, there are multiple blue flash creatures that cost 3 mana. And so if I do end up in a deck where I'm able to hold up the turtle, unless he changed the cost of it, and I'm playing that anyways, then at that point the counterspell gets a lot better, because I get to make the decision of which of those am I doing. And I think that Scry 1 is actually quite strong in this effect. The last time I remember playing a format where I was playing the 3-mana counter spells, I believe was Battle for Zendikar had the 3-mana counter unless they pay 4 exile. And that was quite good in that format. It was a very different format, and a big part of it was the format A being slower and B me having other things to do with my mana. And so it's just hard to evaluate this in a vacuum, because there's some formats where it would be awful, and some formats where it's like, well, what are they doing with their mana? What's already happened? And do I have something else to do with my mana if I am not using Invoke? Like if you take a card that, like Censor was great sometimes, because at least like when I'm not countering, I get a cycle to draw a card. Like I don't get to add to the board, but I'm spending my mana. I'm not completely taking the turn off from doing anything.
Cool. So it seems like might be hard to evaluate at this point, but certainly is not problematic in any sense. Cool. Well, let's move on. We have Obviate.
Yep.
It is 2 and a blue for an instant. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So slightly more expensive than we normally see for a disperse effect. But then it has civilized. Put that permanent on top of its owner's library instead if you control an artifact, a creature, and an enchantment. So it becomes a very, very strong effect for 3 mana.
I was about to say that for 3, at its instant speed turns off Civilized, and this is Civilized Fail as well. Like, it turns into Griptide. I think this is a fine floor ceiling for common. Just goes from a bad tempo play to a 1-for-1, since they have to get a draw step to get their card back.
Into a 3 mana quote murder quote.
Yeah. I actually I do want to note here, though, it is an instant speed way to mess with Civilized, and so far we haven't seen any Civilized effects that grant toughness, and that is very intentional on the part of Matt, due to the way damage works, where if a creature loses toughness while it has damage marked on it,
it can die in a very unintuitive way.
Greater than the toughness it has, it dies. And just in general, in set design, when you have a mechanic like Civilized, you often don't want to grant toughness.
Righto.
And I think that's easy to overlook.
But then in terms of this card, we're saying, therefore, it's not going to cause the huge blowouts that it could if he was ignoring that restriction. But it still might do some strange things. But for 3 mana, that's unlikely to be backbreaking.
Yep, I agree.
So it seems like everything's in a good spot.
Well, I wonder how much is 1 mana off of Griptide worth the Civilized bonus?
Well, it can hit non-creatures.
That's fair. That's fair.
It's very flexible.
And this is a set where non-creatures matter.
That's true.
Cool. Let us move on. We have the Ornery Shellback. It's 2 and a blue for a 1/4 creature turtle. It has flash. And when it enters the battlefield, you may switch its power and toughness until end of turn. So if you want, this is a 3 mana 1/4 flash. And if you want, this is a 3 mana 4/1 flash, which in a lot of circumstances means, that this is a instant that says deal 4 damage to target attacking creature, which is a little weird for blue, but that's kind of what flash creatures do. What do we think? Guys? Putting your thinking caps on?
From a design perspective, I find the card fine. Like, it is weird for blue to have an instant that does that, but it isn't just an instant that does that, because any kind of combat trick or first strike, there's a lot of things that interact with it on a creature level that prevent it from actually just being a removal spell. Horned Turtles, like, maybe look at the mana cost, is blue too cheap for a 1/4 in this set. In terms of what we saw from white so far, there's actually not that many ground creatures that break through this. And so
that we've seen so far, yes.
Yeah, I think the Shellback is quite good. If you kept this version of it, it's fairly loudly a very strong defensive creature for blue. That I do like the intent of having a flash blue creature that I want to play most of my blue decks if we're trying to enable
like a control-y
spells
style
matter and op stuff and things for my blue-red deck. It lets me leave up that mono, and still add to my board. It lets me leave up counter spells and add to my board. So there's things there that are going on. I'm not convinced that blue 2 is the best mana cost for it. But I like the intent of it.
Okay.
I would have to look at it, see play myself.
Because it's a little weird, because it's when normally you're thinking about your flash options, or your instant speed options, you're thinking about, well, I have my counter spell or I have my flash creature. But this is adding a third mode onto that. So we're seeing in these, even at common, we're seeing these when you're holding up 3 mana, you're actually presenting a lot more options than you are in other formats. So that might end up being a little complex. Hard to tell.
So one thing I want to say, if the art file has any elementals, this would be a great place to use that flavor.
Yeah.
There aren't that many things that's evocative of both flash and that effect.
Yeah, because Flash is a little weird turtle
Yeah.
to not flash, to crawl, or whatever, you know?
Yeah, the flavor doesn't really work, does it?
No.
Not really, and I think just elemental, it adds more fantasy to the set and explains the effect well.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, let us move on. We have Turn to Salt. 2 and a blue for an enchantment aura enchant creature. Enchanted creature has base power and toughness 0/4, has a defender, loses all other abilities, and is a wall in addition to its other types. So this is very, very similar to a card that we just saw in Dominaria. What was that called?
I can't remember its name.
Frost Wall. Just basically.
Blue.
Yeah, basically, turn your opponent's creature into a wall. Can't attack anymore, but can block your stuff. And as we were talking about before, we weren't seeing too many things that were busting through this. Obviously, blue is the color of flying. Flyers will be able to get around that. This is just yet another thing that slows down the game and the removal.
I really just like that this is an enchantment. This is enchantment removal. 1 stone in the civilized deck. So it's fighting for the same slot as the Grip Tide a lot of the time.
Both being at 3 mana.
3 mana blue removal that the civilized deck one.
Deep Freeze is the card.
Deep Freeze. Cool.
I mean, I'd rather, because the civilized deck wants enchantment, I like having enchantment removal. But
I'm just surprised this isn't a freeze aura.
Yeah, I mean, having it be...
Oh, like a 2 mana, it doesn't untap.
Yeah, narcolepsy variant or claustrophobia variant. I do think I would prefer that as well, because I have not seen blue creatures that attack through this very well. Like, we have not... Maybe we just haven't gotten to them yet. But
and the fact that it can still die.
Right. The creature can still die when they block, incentivizes me to not attack into it so I can keep civilized. That would be an awful situation. And so replacing it with whatever mana cost we need for a claustrophobia or narcolepsy would be, I think would be preferable for the civilized deck.
Cool. And that would honestly still fit with the flavor completely fine.
Yes. I mean, if you really wanted to add to it, you could have it gain the creature, become an artifact too.
Sure.
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, cool stuff. All right, let us move on. We have Aerial Assistance. It is 3 and a blue for an instant. This spell costs 2 less to cast if you cast another spell this turn, so it kind of has Surge. And then you create a 2/2 blue Lamassu creature token with flying. So you can think about this as a 4 mana flash flyer at 2/2, which is a little worse than we normally see for a 4 mana flash flyer. But if you're otherwise doing stuff, if you're casting creatures, if you're casting other instants or sorceries, it is a 2 mana 2/2 flash flyer, which is pretty good. What are our thoughts?
Like mechanically,
Just kind of like a weird enabler for the blue-red spells deck.
I think it's more underwhelming than it wants to be. But I'm not sure how I would adjust that while keeping the cleanness of the design. I do want to note, and again, this might be something that I am genuinely incorrect about. Lamassus are a lot smaller than I thought they would be.
You're saying as a 2/2? That's a little small.
A 2/2 and the white one was a 2/3. I always imagined them on a similar scale to Sphinxes.
What was the... So, let me just look at some Lamassus we've seen before.
I believe they're 2/3s. We'll scroll down and see a 3/2 in a little bit.
How do you spell Lamassu?
I don't know if we've had one.
Double M. We've only had 2 ever. Okay, one was in Khans of Tarkir. It was a 5/4. And the other was in, I think that is some sort of Ravnica set. And it's a 5/5.
Oh, they're massive.
They're very large. Yeah, so it is a bit strange to be seeing a 2/2 blue Lamassu token. Obviously,
I mean,
this is
making it
kind of
small
making...
on Babylos as a plane.
Yeah, it's making a statement about specifically them in the plane, but which is a little strange just because we've only seen them twice before, right? You don't get that nice contrasting, but they're smaller here, because it's just like, no, this is kind of just the average player's first experience with the creature type. So you're saying they are small, right?
Yeah.
One thing to think about is that this does...
Easy to forget how long ago Cons of Target was.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since that's not one of the memorable Cons cards.
It is not. It's no wingmate rock or whatever. So one thing I was going to say to think about is the fact that this maybe makes a statement about Lamassus being frequent. Like some of them are allowed to be small because there's a lot of them, right? So this is something we would look out for. Are these contrasted with much larger ones? If so, then I think it makes a little more sense. Cool. Are we good?
I'm good. Yep.
Cool. Let us move on. We have Imperial Prosperity. It is 3 and a blue for a sorcery. Draw 2 cards. Create a colorless artifact gold token with sacrifice this artifact. Add 1 mana of any color. So you draw 2 cards and make a gold token. Very, very similar to what we saw in Ixalan with, what was that, Pirate's Prize? Something like that. Basically, divination on layaway.
I enjoy what this does for slow civilized decks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things to remember here is also that, like, it does enable, right? This card, I don't have to sack the artifact. I can just use that to turn my civilized on until I draw an artifact.
Which I really enjoy.
Right, and so I do like that about Treasure. It enables our blue-green archetype, which is a 5-color splash ramp, clearly, because it both draws me more cards, so I hit my land drops, hit my fatties, and it gives me mana. It's also a spell for my blue-red deck. I think that it's a nice hit. The art shows me what's going on, paints the world. I like the card. I like the card. I think it's a home run.
Sorry about that. I got distracted in real life. So I don't know what was said, but good stuff, I assume.
Yes. Yeah. it doesn't look too pushed. It doesn't look overpowered.
No.
It's not.
No, it's
not a
good.
super early pick. It's not a super late pick, but it enables and helps all of the blue archetypes.
Yep.
And so that with flavor that sells.
I
so
really like this
me,
in blue-green, for example.
Yes.
That's good stuff.
Right, but then on top of that, it's an artifact for my blue-white or blue-black civilized control deck.
All right.
It's a spell for my blue-red deck.
I think we can. Let's move on. We have Namuzar's Iterator. It is 3 and a blue for a 3/2 creature, Lamassu, so a little bit bigger than we saw before. Not huge though. It is flying. When it enters the battlefield, you may return an artifact or enchantment you control to its owner's hand. So you can bounce an artifact or enchantment. If I remember correctly, this was once again intended to be a discovery kind of thing. But it's a little weird. Unlike creature self-bounce, where you're much more likely to get an ETB with a creature self-bounce. You're much more likely to be like saving them from enchantment-based removal or something like that. With this, what are you really doing?
Most of the
removal we've seen so far has not
seen heavy duties, like all of the equipment, colored equipment.
Yep.
Discoveries too.
Yep.
And sometimes you want to move an aura around. Like it.
Okay.
This is often and it is a May. This is
yes.
It's never going to be a field bed.
It's not a downside. It's not. Yeah.
Well, I will say that having played the card, I'd much rather see. I think that blue would prefer this being a 2/3 to a 3/2. Or defensively statted, more defensively statted. Being in the game that we played, I've had to board them out because of the the removal spell that killed a 2 toughness creature. It just
The one in
blue,
black.
white civilized, blue, black, white civilized are both control decks. A ramp deck ramping into a creature that dies to removal that's cheaper than it. These are all things where, like, I better be getting the trigger off at CTB, or I'm putting myself in a pretty bad tempo swing position where my 4-drop is likely to block and trade with your 2-drop.
Yeah. I mean, it's one thing to think about the fact that it's a 3/2 flyer. Those are always going to be very good. But maybe it's an issue of that's not how I want to win the game. You know, I'm willing to take that risk if, okay, my plan is to kill them with a 3/2 flyer. But no, my plan is to kill them with artifact and enchantment cool stuff.
Well, right.
You know, I want to do something cooler
that,
than that. So yeah.
A 3/2 flyer is not always a 3/2 flyer is not good when you don't have creatures coming down before it, right?
When the opponent,
if I'm paying 4 mana for a 3/2 that can't be blocked, and you paid 3 mana for a 3/2, your card's better than mine, and less flying is relevant. And from what I saw of
the format, that's not always the case.
It's not always the case that my 4-drop blue creature is going to be at a luxury to be able to be attacking when I'm also playing artifacts.
I mean, if it's a slower environment, if the board's being gummed up, it's going to be highly relevant.
Right, but because I'm playing it with artifacts and enchantments, I'm less likely to have more blockers.
You're less likely to be gumming up the board.
Yes.
Yeah.
In an aggressive deck that is using, I don't know, that is. I'm saying that in the civilized deck, I don't think a 3/2 flyer is what you want.
Okay.
Because you want to be winning with your artifacts and enchantments, that it's synergizing.
Sure, that seems reasonable. Cool, nuanced stuff, right? I like it. Are we good to move on?
I am.
Cool. So here we go. The next card is Yavena's Hydromancer. It is 3 and a blue for a 2/3 creature, Naga wizard. That's the first time I think we've seen Naga in the set. When it enters the battlefield, tap target artifact, creature, or enchanted permanent an opponent controls. That permanent doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So that's kind of weird. That's a kind of a weird arrangement of things, of tappiness.
I believe the intent is for the civilized deck. You enchant your opponent's permanent with some downside, whatever, and you freeze it. The unintended effect is punishing enchanting your own creatures with positive force.
Or enchanting your lands.
Yeah. Like, that can be a huge tempo swing. I'm not sure I like the line of text enchanted permanent here.
I agree.
Yeah, this card seems kind of strange to me. It's also a 4 mana 2/3.
It wants to be a tempo creature, like a.
This used to be a 3/2.
Yeah.
But then he swapped the iterator to a 3/2 and swapped this to a 2/3, and I think now we're all saying like, hey, go back.
Right. Well, the deck that wants the Hydromancer, I don't know. I actually am unsure.
I mean, no, like if you're freezing your opponent's stuff and playing creatures, that is, that's a tempo strategy.
Right.
Most of the time, and especially if we're taking off enchanted permanent, if we're not doing weird, if we're freezing a creature more often, I think it's going to be more like, hey, I want to be attacking it.
Yep. Yeah. I agree.
Cool. Are we good with that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. We have the Rabudon Overseer. It is 4 and a blue for a 2/6 creature Lamassu. So this is a high toughness Lamassu here. And it has flying as long as you cast a non-creature spell this turn. I am not a fan of this card. And it's often just because of the fact that there's kind of the attitude of, if I'm playing a 5-drop, how many more non-creature spells do I have to play this game? You know what I mean? Which isn't really true, but it's one of the things that comes into play. And especially when you're putting a lot more focus on non-creature spells in blue-red, this does not scream that. This, it's a 5-mana 2/6. When I think blue-red spells, I'm thinking prowessy, not value-y,
And so much of blue is already slow. I do think the intent is that, prowess and non-creature triggers off of artifacts and enchantments as well. But Oh boy, if I cast my artifact or enchantment on my turn, I can
I
crack
can
in
hit
for
them
2
for
with my
2
5-drop.
damage. Whee!
Oh
And
boy.
give up 6 toughness of block.
Yeah. Oh
Great.
boy, I can flash in something at instant speed and block once with my 5-drop. Oh boy.
Yeah, it's
I,
not working.
Yeah, this just
I'm not
seems like a
sure.
dud.
Yeah, I'm not sure what role this is trying to fill in the set. I do want to say I'm feeling a little bit swarmed by Lamassu here. I think
Mhm.
the spell that makes a 2/2 Lamassu would be better off making a bird token.
Mhm.
Well, first of all, you can show a bird off in the setting. I really enjoy, like, not even an Aven. I just mean a literal, actual bird.
Mhm.
Uh, Showing the wildlife, while not necessarily fantasy, can get people into the setting easier. It like
Mhm.
flora, even just typical flora and fauna can really help people get into it. Magically summoning a bird overcomes the mundanity of that, and it just reduces some of the sameness of all of the blue flyers being Lamasu.
Uh, 3 of them are. There's a 4th. Aven.
Oh, sorry, one of them is an Aven. My
Yeah,
mistake.
that's fine. 3 out of 4. Yeah, I definitely enjoy like just a bird here, or like a drake or a cloud elemental or something.
I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah. So this definitely seems like not what it wants to be doing. I think.
Yep, agreed.
All right, let's move on. We have the Atuzan nobility. That's a bit hard to pronounce. 4 blue for a 5/6 creature human advisor. It has defender, but with civilized, it can attack as though it didn't have defender if you control an artifact, a creature, and an enchantment. In the one game that I played against this card, it was actually pretty good, just with the slowness of the game that we played, both the decks being very grindy and civilized being something that eventually will always come into play in the
I
deck
believe
that's built
I
around
believe
it
I
correctly.
drew it both games. You just killed it. One of the games you killed it right away.
One of the games I did, yeah. But it's big. Like from what we've seen of the format so far, this is big.
I mean, I like this.
You know,
I have a
I really
complaint
enjoy
about
the
the card,
design.
but I like there being a 6-mana 5/6 card that's going to wheel that is difficult to turn on. Like Civilized is more difficult than you realize. Or not you
Mhm.
specifically, but like as a drafter, it doesn't happen immediately. Like it does take work to do.
Yes.
That is going to be a big defensive blue blocker who does wheel to that deck, kind of similar to some of the other blue serpents that we've seen. I
Mhm.
like that being in it, and I like the text of the card. This is an execution of civilized on a creature that I like. What doesn't work for me is the flavor of the card. This doesn't really feel like an
Yes.
advisor. This feels like an army, or maybe like just a whole bunch of people who when I'm civilized, I can now arm them.
Yeah,
And
maybe
the
like
art doesn't even read as a creature. Like nobody's
no.
filming the camera. There's more movement happening. They're offering these two people salads, and there's this one guy mugging in front of the camera.
Yeah, this
And
is the
they're
scene
five
for an enchantment
sixes
or
for
something.
some reason.
Yeah, the flavor is now not really working for me, but
Yeah.
the text box, right?
Mhm.
And I think you were saying the same thing, Zoo, that playing against it, it felt like something the civilized deck should be doing and should be kind of getting for free in draft. And that if you're a blue civilized deck, this is going to wheel to you and you'll have access to one always.
Mhm.
Yeah, 5/6 does hit hard. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Cool.
Yep.
So what are we guys thinking on time? Are we thinking we're going to be able to continue on? Because we do obviously with the last one, with the Daharam one, we did it in 2 parts. We could theoretically do this one in 3, the commons that is, if we wanted to make it a little nicer.
I think 3 parts might be, um, if not better for us, better just for viewers.
Mhm.
Like for people looking through, especially
Yeah.
for Matt, if he's trying to look at what we said about a specific common.
Easier to find.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, so we've finished through white. We talked about every single card in white and some of the maybe more structural things going on with it. And now we've talked about every single card in blue. Let's finish up with a little bit of talking about anything that we notice that might be structurally problematic in blue. Is there anything that you guys noticed so far?
I'm not sure. Like, I think blue's curve is very functional.
Mm-hmm.
I can't recall any effects it is too light or heavy on.
Mm-hmm.
I do think blue is very biased towards civilized here. I'm not feeling a lot of love towards a blue-red tempo deck or
Mm-hmm.
any like vaguely fast deck, or
Yeah.
just not even fast, just fast as in
Proactive.
slow. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
blue is a little too reactive here actually, and that's one thing that buffing the 2/3 prowess for 3. If you
We'll
want
do a
to
lot.
if you wanted to add a set theme to that, I mean, um, like those can be very useful proactively since they can be hard to deal with on
Mhm.
curve.
Certainly.
I'd like to
Yeah.
see one more We only have one common blue treasure. Is that right?
So far, presumably it's not in white.
I believe
I think it's in Sultai,
Cleo
I
said
think.
blue. Cleo
blue
said
treasure.
Oh, in
The card
blue.
that
Okay,
yeah,
makes
specifically.
I,
Yeah, we
Which
saw
I
I
one.
believe it's
It's like a
meant to be
sub-theme.
major theme.
No,
Well,
it's a
I
very
don't-
minor theme in the set, if I remember correctly.
Okay, well, so my comment is that blue green is the 5-color ramp deck,
Yeah.
and that I would like to see. I actually see. So if we ignore blue red for a moment, blue white and blue black, the Esper civilized basically looks very supported to me. One of the things
Yes.
that is supporting that is that now that we've kind of looked through, the counterspell actually does have a fair number of things. It does look good because you have alternatives to cast that turn, whether it's going to be a bounce spell, whether it's going to be the Lamasu paired with an opt, or whether it's going to be the turtle. You're able to have options to let me play that, which suggests that a control deck is viable. That
Or
I'm going to
even
have
like on 5 mana, you counterspell Lamasu.
right, and so that says the control is viable. I have actually, if you scroll through it, a fair number of cards that are producing my artifacts and enchantments for whether it's the artifact or whether it's the looting land, cards that I want to play in my deck that is enabling civilized. I would like to see one or two more cards that go into the blue-green ramp deck, so we have like the ability to ramp to, but then I'm blue-green civilized, right? And we don't want to do that. So
That maybe that's something that Rabudan Overseer that slot becomes.
Yeah, I think
Just because that's not the slot for the blue red prowess deck. 5 mana.
No, it's not. It's the slot. It is the slot for the blue-green deck.
Oh yeah, swap. Are we talking about swapping that with the 2-drop civilized?
That would be for the Esper deck. To go backwards, I think that I want to see one more treasure card in blue. I think that one more treasure card actually helps all of the archetypes. It helps blue-green ramp. It helps all of the civilized decks. And I think the treasure does help the spells deck because it lets you build up to
one thing to
burst
think
turn.
about is that we obviously have been seeing a lot more of the enchantments, just because those are more likely to be colored, and we haven't gotten any look at the common colorless artifacts. So that's something that might change your opinion a little bit. But it's like it probably wouldn't destroy anything. You know, maybe Canvas Street Markets makes a gold token on ETB, goes up to 4 mana, something like that.
I get that.
Oh no, because that would be an enchantment that makes an artifact. Yeah, that'd be too much. Yeah.
Oh,
never mind.
You're right.
Yeah. But something somewhere.
Centurion Architect changing into a flyer that made gold on ETB could be nice.
Sure.
Which one's the archetype?
The 2 mana flyer.
Civilized 2-drop.
Yeah.
That we thought was a little awkward.
Could be like a 1/2 ETB make a treasure.
Yeah, and it's
Are you
kind of like Slither Blade net mana, but
more flexible.
Yeah, more flexible.
I think there's a lot of options. Treasure is a fairly fun and exciting mechanic. I thought it was an Ixalan. I enjoyed playing it a lot.
There's a reason every custom set ever has it. It just naturally plays well.
and it fits. Right. I think
It
that
does
in
good
some
things
sets,
here.
I think that in some sets I would come in and say like, I really dislike the use of treasure here, blah blah blah. In this set, I think that it really enables what blue is doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think that it enables all 5 of the blue archetypes. I do like that blue is a little bit slower and reactive. As a player, I like that. Maybe as a designer, you have to remove some of that. You know. Um,
Yeah, because you do
and
want there to be at least a little bit of variety.
yeah, yeah. But which of the blue archetypes is aggressive? It's blue red, and
Yeah.
what does blue red have? Blue red really only has the 2/3 prowess
Mm-hmm.
and the Lamasu, the instant that makes a Lamasu. Is that really it?
But that card goes into kind of a lot of blue.
Right.
So it's only really the prowess, which is like, yep, that's solidly blue red tempo.
Yeah. No, I mean like
You know?
if it really is a tempo deck,
Like
we do
even
need more
even
for
the
that.
disruption is like not, it's not
It's very slow
amazing for it.
disruption.
Yeah, like River Dallas, it's
There's
like,
like
oh, you can kind of do things with that in blue red, but it's like,
But yeah, it's not like ideal. And your bounce spell, which oftentimes is premier in blue red,
mm-hmm,
it
is
requires
not.
civilized to be good.
Mm-hmm.
like there's
So
not anything unsummoned here.
Mm-hmm.
right. Well, and the one card that is requires you to have civilized,
Yeah.
which blue red
No,
doesn't.
he meant tier as in terms of like power level.
Efficient.
Okay,
Like in terms
Yeah,
of
yeah,
wow,
just
that's
like
a
one
that's a
mana.
tempo gain right there. Yeah.
Right.
So that
And
seems
so-
like those. Oh, sorry, you have more.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna close this out. But if you have more to talk
I
about,
think that having another card or two, like if I think about the advisors, which is a card that is always going to table for the civilized deck that no one else wants and that really helps that deck accomplish its goals. I want to see another card like that for blue red that is going to table that the blue red player is going to get
mm-hmm.
kind of for free, quote unquote, for being in that archetype that really supports what they're doing. And I'm not 100% sure what that is, but something along those lines, a common. I think that there is room for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not 100% sure what it is.
Um,
I mean, maybe follow the flavor of your prowess creature. The prowess guy actually has. I like his flavor text a lot. He talks about like showing you the world or the city, and the flavor of like what the rogues are doing in this world. Right. It's I can get you anywhere across the empires. What's that worth to you? That flavor is pretty sweet, and maybe another
He's like
card
a
that,
human trafficker.
yeah, absolutely, or trafficking something. Another card that plays into that flavor might be
That could be
might
cool.
be
Something
pretty
that makes a gold token, perhaps.
perhaps.
Hmm.
I didn't think about that.
and next time we will be talking about black and red, correct?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, we'll move straight into that.
And that will act. So tomorrow we will finally get into Endure,
Mm-hmm.
a mechanic we haven't seen yet. So
Yep.
that will
In
be
fact, we've only
fun.
seen, well, one mechanic and then a sub theme in Treasure, and obviously we've said like, hey, we'd like to see more of that.
And discoveries are
So-
at uncommon.
Mhm.
It might. Do we actually
Well,
just one topic,
probably
one discovery to show it, since we won't be getting to uncommons anytime soon.
I was thinking maybe in the third final stream we go through all of the discoveries. That could be cool. Just because we'd only be doing green and
Like
colorless.
artifacts will be quicker than dough harms.
Yeah, yes, it
for
will
sure.
be.
Yeah, and so just a few bonus uncommons in the discoveries. I like that.
Cool, seems good. This was a really great stream, guys. Thank you for anyone who was watching during any part of it or is now still watching, but I think we only have one viewer this time. We're gonna hang out. So look forward to the next time where we're gonna be covering black and red. That'll probably be in the next few days. And I think it'll be just as good as this one. Thanks everybody. Adios.
Bye.
Thank you for having me.